was 2003, and I crashed from my eating disorder. They really didn't know how to treat me. I survived that. I was in hospitals here in Denver. It was my worst nightmare to go into residential inpatient treatment, but it was the best thing that ever happened to me, because in 8 weeks' time, I started my journey on recovery. It was a big adjustment. I was no longer the same person. Our dynamic, our relationship, our communication was no longer the same. And in the course of that, I realized that while I was in the hospitals here, as well as Iowa, I was gone for probably 3.5 months. And Jonathan, my husband, really had no support other than a paid therapist at ED Care, what is now ED Care. But no other husbands to talk to, no other family members to share with. He was all alone. But I was very passionate about it, had no idea what I was getting into. So we decided to have a meeting to launch EDF. And that was our original board: my brother-in-law, Jay, Richard Krause, Ken Weiner, Ellen Hart, and me. And I was the one who had the time to do the work. So I started petitioning friends. We had a very good friend who owned a building in Cherry Creek. He had some office space in the basement. Let us have that at 3rd and Milwaukee for next to nothing. And my husband bought some furniture at Crate and Barrel, bought our first computers, and we just started.
It sounds like the eating disorder field in general has changed a lot since you got things started.
It was called Eating Disorder Center of Denver. And I think Ken Weiner broke out from that to start his own eating recovery center. So that gave an option for people over 21 to be inpatient or residential, which was great that Denver now had that. And then it was about, I want to say it was 2004, because I remember I was still newly out of treatment when Phil Mailer started the acute center at Denver Health. And that made like national news, because the only other thing like it in the country was Johns Hopkins. And acute, of course, now draws people from all over the world.
But it's so interesting because in 2003, there really wasn't anything. It almost feels like you had this really, when I said in my gala speech, like a revolutionary idea.
Well, it was
very true.
I remember joining NEDA and going to my first conference. And there, I think there were, they called it the NEDA network. I think there were 5 organizations throughout the country. Most of them didn't survive it very long. A few of us, so, you know, I was told, you know, you're probably not going to survive 5 years. The percentage of little nonprofit startups is so, the percentage of failure within the first 5 years is so high. And we just didn't listen to that. We just kept moving ahead. You know, a little can go a long way. But I have to say, when I shared with close friends what our mission was, I got a lot of resistance, a lot of naysayers. Some of my best friends said that's not going to work. People know it's an illness of rich white girls. They're not going to give you money. They're not going to support you. That's how uneducated people were 20 years ago. These original volunteers, we could not have done this without them. Each had such an important role to play. Linda would come into the office with me every day. We would spend 6-8 hours in that office. We started an education committee who put together our educational programs. They were very bare bones then. I remember the first time I went to a school, it was an elementary school way out west. I was petrified, and it went really well. I was really passionate about educating young people before an eating disorder might come into their lives, whether it was with a sibling, a parent, themselves, a friend. So we just continued at that and continued. It grew and grew. Over time, we just gathered more and more support from people in the community. We had one support group that we started at the end of 2003, which a therapist from EDCD, Enola Gorham, ran with me, and learning from her when she no longer could participate, I was able to lead that group. And it just met twice a month, but it was wonderful. And that's when we knew we needed a support group for people suffering. And some of those people stepped up and facilitated those support groups. So I think we had two by the time the owner of the building where we were, our friend, came to me and said he was going to lose the building, and that I was going to have to move. He found us where you are now. And the owners were two doctors and their wives. And I had Jonathan, my husband's an architect, as you know, come look at it. He said it was a very sound building. He knew we could pop the top and remodel the whole building. But they were asking, I believe, $550 for it. And we had like $25,000 in the account. I don't know if we even had that much. And so we had to figure out a way. It was maybe a group of 10 or 12 of us. The next day, I get a call from Patty and Greg Huney. Can you and Jonathan have lunch? We were friends by this time. So we met. I'll never forget it. We went to North. We had lunch, and they said, we have something to tell you. We're going to buy the building, and we're going to pay for the remodel of the building. But first, we want to know, if we do it, will people come? If we build it, will people come? So we had this focus group to give Greg an answer. If we build it, will they come? We had a number of questions. Everybody voted on things. Yes, you need a yoga room, which proved to be, you know how. Yes, we need to have support groups for patients. We need to have support groups for different age groups. I mean, so much information came out of that focus group. It was wonderful that we thought, they all said if they had patients who needed support or their families needed support, they would refer to us. So we went back to the Huneys with all the information, and they bought the house. Jonathan donated his architectural services. I went as an interior designer. I knew a lot of carpet, paint, lighting, electrical. So we asked for favors. And actually, the carpet that's in there, the carpet squares, are leftover from Children's Hospital, from their eating disorder unit. Isn't that something? So we got their leftovers dirt cheap because it was the excess.
Like everything's connected.
I'm so grateful to have the staff that you all are, because we've gone through many iterations. So we were working hard at getting the word out. But, my greater vision was always to have a national network, kind of like AA, where wherever someone is, if they feel the need, they can get to a meeting. And of course, the founder of AA, I think there's been a movie about it even. I know many books. People thought he was crazy. And it's a lifeline for many, many people. So I was hoping one day there could be a whole network of organizations like, or us, EDF chapters all over the country, all over the world. So, we've hit a lot of bumps along the way, but we've overcome the bumps, maintaining just the commitment to our mission. And when we moved into the house, it was 2012 in February. We started our candlelight vigils in front of my house here in Cherry Creek. There's a little, right at the entrance, I still have the pictures of our circle. And we started doing things that became yearly rituals for us that meant something. The birdhouses, the garden, and the house really changed things where people could come in and hang out. And people did that a lot the first few years. People would just come, bring their computers, bring a book, which gave us more exposure. And we kept adding groups, and look at how many you've added since you started. I mean, we only had, just a handful, not even.
Yeah, I still keep a flyer from just before COVID in my office. There are 7 groups that were in this office before COVID.
Yeah.
And was even an increase. I wonder, I don't remember, it was McKenna when we started. I think it was 5.
Yeah, when I
Probably.
started, I think it was about 7, and we had just
Oh.
started adding our offsite groups. So
Oh,
at the time,
got
I
it.
think we had Boulder
Colorado
and
Springs.
Vail.
Yeah.
And then after that, we did Montrose and Colorado Springs, and those lasted until COVID happened.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And then we also had our one virtual group that started like maybe a year before COVID happened. And so luckily we were already set up for
You were set up for it.
all the
'Cause,
Zoom
man,
stuff that we needed to do.
Yeah.
I remember Danny calling me and saying, "It looks like this is really serious. What should we do?" I said, "You should close. We should." And we were able to start virtual groups like within days. I was amazed. And, look at the outreach we have now. We would have people come in person, and it was always the same people. We would have new people here and there, but now, every other group I get new people.
And I think it's funny because a lot of folks who come to the groups now don't know that like their groups are still connected to back when things were here in the building, like the Tuesday groups at 6, or the art journaling group every Thursday, or the 30 plus group on Saturday mornings. Those were just our regular in-person groups that got transferred onto Zoom and just stuck with that schedule. And so they're still connected in that way too.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's just very gratifying to hear the impact the groups have on these individuals. And then the workshops that you all have instituted over the past few years. I mean, everyone in my group knows Dr. Adele. They've learned a lot. We share resources, books, blogs. So it just is a deeper connection all the time. I've been in recovery now for 20 years. It feels really good. And I'm just honored to be able to help people find their way through supporting their loved ones, which is so why Adele was such a gift to me personally, in the fact that I've been supporting families and friends now for 20 years. She really expresses the importance of a caregiver and how they can be very involved in the recovery process, because they don't know what to do. So
what has it meant to you to run that group for the last 20 years?
Oh my gosh. It does as much or more for me as it does for them, I'm sure. And I've heard every kind of story, and sometimes it's heartbreaking. But so often I hear, I don't know what I'd do without this group. This group is my lifeline. This group, well, you heard Amy and Patrick at the gala. And so it's been one of the most gratifying things to me. I remember when group was held at the house, and I would always be the last one to leave, to lock up, check that the bathroom lights were off, And in the summer, when it would stay light and warm after group, I'd just put my elbows on that chain link fence and look out at the garden and just start crying. That I didn't think we would ever get that far, that fast. We moved into the house 2012. So that's been 11 years, almost 12. It was February that we moved in. And I just had to pinch myself. The power of community, the power of volunteerism, and the power of people who have been there to not abandon it and not just put it away in their past, which so many people do. And I think there's a danger in that. I always warn my families in group, continue to have your loved one go to therapy for maybe 5 more years. I know it sounds like a long time, but the relapse rate is so high. So continued support, continued work on recovery, I think is really vital. And that's what EDF provides for people. For me personally, it held me accountable. You know, when you're in the midst of an eating disorder, you protect it, you lie to keep it, and you feel like a fraud because who you're projecting isn't the real you. And so speaking in schools, speaking to young people, speaking at the family and friends group every week held me accountable.
I guess I'm curious too, like where you expect or hope the eating disorder field to be in another 20 years. Like if you had kind of like a magic crystal ball, if what that would look like.
A cure, prevention and a cure. You know, if it were caused by one thing, it would be so easy to target that one thing, but it's caused by culture. It's caused by upbringing. It's caused by biology. It's caused by genetics. It's caused by brain function. But I would love, I think, you know, the exploration of psychedelics is an important journey in the future. I think educating our culture, you know, they're talking about, we talk about body image and how that movement is moving ahead, and yet I don't see a big change. You know, when I look at celebrities and stuff, I don't see a big change in acceptance. And I'm hoping it will change. There's so much that goes into an eating disorder. But of course, we'd all love to see a cure and a strategy of prevention that works for men, women, children.
It's been so helpful to hear like how much energy and effort and community it took to build EDF. I think now that like since I've known EDF, we've been in the house, like I used to come here as a volunteer, and now like learning so much, I'm like, oh, there was so much legwork that had to go into getting us here. And now that you're 20 years in, what do you feel most proud of that EDF has done? Is there any program that sticks out to you or any specific group, anything that you're like, wow, that just really like warms my heart and I feel full from one specific thing?
I don't think I could name a specific thing. Of course, I'm biased and love my groups, but I think they're all wonderful. From feedback I get, I have parents of people who go to our groups where those group members tell my people, I want you to go to the family and friends group, which I think is remarkable that someone would have their loved ones go to it. Yeah. I don't think there's any one thing in particular. I'm very proud of educational efforts. I'm proud of it all. I really am, that we have lasted 20 years and we're still viable. We're going to continue. We're going to expand, hopefully one day. To offer this service to people is a blessing for all of us, not just them. To be able to give back. So many people lost their lives to this illness that I went through treatment with, that I've known, and to be able to perhaps prevent one more is extremely sacred.
Well, thank you for your vision and what you believe to be true and sticking with it 20 years ago, you know, when all those people were telling you no, the fact that you didn't listen and maybe probably took it more as motivation. And
Yes,
I know our community is a completely different community because you stepped into your own recovery and then stepped into wanting to make greater change. So true, like you've touched more lives than you'll ever know. And we just couldn't,
thank you.
you know, the community's indebted to you. So thank you for everything.
Thank you.
I'm not fully convinced that you don't have a crystal ball and that you didn't see all of this happening because you stuck through it. Like, I do know that there's a lot of statistics about how many like nonprofits fail within X amount of years, and just like being reminded that like there's been so much evolution over what we've done, but yet so many things have remained consistent, you know, like at the same time,
Right.
like
Right. But,
it's incredible.
you know, there were times when I'd come home and just cry and feel so helpless, like this can't go on. There were many times where I felt very discouraged. But I think part of it was my naivete. I did not approach it as a business. It was just a deep passion. That's my story.